All right, here we are, we're back. Time to write some functions, time to get into the real JavaScript. So I've expanded this out. All I've done is just dragged these side things to the side so that we have more space to look at our JavaScript, since we're going to be looking at it in this other page whenever we reload it anyway. And I've pasted in a bunch of code. Now, this is a ton of stuff. We're obviously not going to go over this all like right now, and you don't have to understand it right now. But I wanted to put a whole function here instead of trying to build it step by step, because I find that building it step by step is just too confusing. You have to explain everything as we go along, and we still don't know what the heck we're doing. So we're going to start by writing a function. So a function is basically something that you tell the computer, hey, I want some information. I want you to do something. Again, we talked about doing step by step. A function is where you tell it the steps that you want it to do. You know, when you say the toaster is functioning, you mean that when you put bread into it and you press down and it does its thing, and at the end it gives you toast. It took something and it changed it and it gave it back to you. And that's a very good way to think about what we're doing with a function in programming too. We're giving it something, we're telling it to do something, and it's giving us back some kind of change that it did. Very abstract, but we're going to get into that. So let's learn the syntax of this function by looking at it. First of all, we write the word function. That's a special word in JavaScript. And when you write the word function, the next thing that you write is going to be the name of the function. Now, there's two normal ways that people write names of functions. One of them is with this thing I've done here, which is called camel casing, which means there's a lowercase, then an uppercase, uppercase, uppercase at each word. Another way would be to do something like function pick a random word with underscores between. That's also very common. You can't use things like dashes when you're saying what a function is, and you generally don't want it to just be like one long text like that. It becomes hard to read later on. A big part of programming is making it easy so that when you come back to it later, you can figure out what it's doing. So usually when we have a function, we want to describe what it's doing. We don't want to call it like function one or new function or something. That's so you're going to be confused. So here, what my function is doing is it's picking a random word. Okay, well, it's picking a random word. Obviously, it's not super useful, but that's what we're doing. And I've done it in this camel case style. Then I have to do these two parentheses, and we'll get into a bit later that there's more details around what can happen in these parentheses, but that's also telling a function, hey, this is a function. If you put these parentheses after, function, name of the function, parentheses, we're good. And then we have our curly braces, just like we saw in CSS. And these curly braces, everything inside of them is going to be the actual steps of our function. That's where the real juice is going to happen. So in this case, let's walk through it. First of all, we want to pick a random word. Now, the words we're going to pick from are going to be word 1, word 2, and word 3. Those are the three things I've defined here as being possible things that this function will return. That's the language we use, like the toaster returns your toast to you. So you can see here there's this word return. So in one case it's returning this first word, in another case it's returning the second word, in another case it's returning the third word. You might have noticed that these are a little different. We'll come back to that. Let's just go step by step. So when we're picking the random word, first of all, we need to get something random so we can actually pick a random thing. JavaScript doesn't have the ability to pick a random word for you because it doesn't really know words, but it can pick a random number. They're good with numbers. Computers are good with numbers. Let's just go with that. So there's this thing, in, just like we saw with the console log, there's a thing called math, which weirdly has an uppercase M instead of lowercase. I don't know. So it has this little thing that's called math.random, which is actually a function itself, which returns a number between 0 and 1. That's the random range that it has. It could be anything from 0 to 1, but it'll be a random number in that range. Now, next, I console log the random number because I want us to see what it is. And then we check. We go, if the random number is less than 0.5, then we're going to return the first word. We'll go over this a bit more. If the random number is greater than or equal to 0.5 and the random number is less than 0.75, we'll return word 2. And if the random number is greater than or equal to 0.75, we return the word 3. Now, that's just a real quick look. We're going to just do it here, and we're going to see what happens, and then we're going to come back and look at actually like it a bit more. So we first of all do this thing. We have this random word, and it equals, and we look at that function that it looks like we're calling that function now. That's what we call it. We're running the function or calling the function. We're turning the toaster on. And then we're going to console log whatever it returned, whatever it came back as. So let's step aside from what all the questions and like confusion that's probably bubbling in your head right now, and let's see how it works, and then we'll take a closer look. So if we refresh the page, so we're just going to open up our dev tools and look at this beside it. So first thing that happened is that our function ran. This is where we actually ran the function. Then inside the function, it defined the random number. Here it console logged it. So we see it came out with 0.222 and a whole long number there. So that is less than 0.5. So it went, oh, it's less than 0.5. Then it did this thing where it did an equals first word equals word 1, and it returned that. And then at the end, because it returned that, here we're console logging random word, and we come up with word 1. Let's try running this just a couple other times and see what other results we get. So we run it again by refreshing the page. This time it's greater than 0.5, but it's less than 0.75. So we get the second word. Now let's reload it again. We get 0.29. Again, that's a value we've seen. 0.63, that's word 2. Let's see if we can get a word 3. Okay, we got a 0.99. So that gives us word 3. So one of the reasons why we made this second if statement, which is what we call this if statement has two different conditions to it. Whereas the first one was just if it's less than 0.5, then give us word 1. And the last one is if it's more than 0.75, give us word 3. We have to have more than 1 for the second if condition. So why is that? Well, because that number we just got, 0.99, if we just had one condition like this, it would return, it would be confused a little, right? Because 0.99 is greater than 0.5, and it's also greater than 0.75. So we want it to return the second word only if it's between 0.5 and 0.75. So we have to tell JavaScript, oh, the random number is greater than 0.5 and the random number is less than 0.75. Okay, all kind of crazy stuff. But the point is mainly to show you that you can have multiple conditions inside one of these if statements, which is checking to see if something is the case or isn't the case. Now, another thing we need to go over real quick is variables. So throughout this, we've been using variables. Here, when I have this thing that says let, it says let random number equal math.random. So this equals sign is taking the math random value and putting it into a little variable called random number. A variable is basically just a little label that's being given onto a bit of information, in this case a random number. And so later I can refer to that label and the computer knows what I'm referring to. So we do this a lot. Variables are really important, and you can think of them basically as labels. So here in this case, the random number equals the math.random. Now here we have the first word equals word 1. So these variables can be numbers, they can be what we call strings or sets of text. They can be a lot of different things, but you should know that you need to use them, and variables are going to be a big part of how we do things. Now here in our actual if statement, we reference the variable because we defined it here. We said let random number equal the random number returned by this. And here we reference it. We say, hey, you know that thing I called the random number before? Can you check to see if it's between 0.5 and 0.75? Oh, can you? It's not, eh? Okay, can you check to see if it's above 0.75? And so we're telling it, hey, I labeled something before. Can we check it now? This is all the step by step. We can't just tell the computer in one single step, hey, check and give me the random word. We have to find these kind of contrived ways to do the step-by-step process. And that's really what programming is. That's the real magic. When you start to think like a programmer, you start to break things down into these kind of steps. You know, when you think about tying your shoes, now, because you're an expert at tying your shoes, you don't even think about it. You just go, oh, I just need to tie my shoes, and you're done. But when you were a little kid, someone had to teach you every painstaking step. And it was hard for them to explain it to you because it's so automatic. And it's hard for you to figure out because this step by step is strange until it becomes automatic. So with programming, we always have to break things down to step by step because the computer just doesn't get it if we try to tell it what to do. We have to spell it out every step. So we use things like functions, like variables, like numbers, and like returning things, you know, having a function return some value and console logging it so we can see it to see if it worked. We do all these kinds of things with programming. So this is probably a little overwhelming. You're feeling a little bit like I threw a lot at you, which is good. You should feel a little bit overwhelmed. There's going to be a little bit in the quizzes, if you're doing this on a platform with quizzes, to kind of help drive a couple of these very basic ideas into your head. But the main way that I want you to get these ideas is not by staring at this and just trying to figure it out. We're going to do it by doing this over and over to where a variable, even if you don't really understand like what it is or like why it's a thing, you're going to just start using them. And that, I think, is the best way to really learn programming, is just by using it. So in the next series of lectures, we're going to be going over different types of variables and all sorts of stuff like that. So let's go into that.